Hi everybody, it's Nightmare on Scam Street here. I'm just going to do a fairly short flight from Ljubijana to Venice, and I think it's going to be quite interesting. It's probably only about 30 minutes. What I want to do now is I've set the aircraft to be sitting on a ramp and ready to go. So the only AI I really use is the AI first officer for communicating with air traffic control. It makes life a bit easier. So what I'm going to do now is go to the overhead switchboard. I want to check that I've got external power available. If we have a look at the outside of the aircraft, we'll see that on the right hand side there's a small generator that is providing the aircraft power when I need it to. So checking our batteries, voltage is okay, and we're going to switch them on. It looks odd that when I turn this first one on, the second one shows off. That's because there's now power to show that they're off. We'll switch them both on. We'll have a quick look down at the pedestal to make sure that the the throttles are in the right position and that the brakes are applied. We also need to check that the windscreen wipers are off, because as soon as you power up, if those are switched on, you'll get a sudden burst of windscreen wiping, which can really scratch the windscreen, and these are not cheap windscreens. So now we can turn on the external power. At the same time, we're going to put the nav system into active mode, so it's pilot, first officer, and then back up. And we're going to do a quick scan of this section of the panel. Anything that's white is off, and Airbus have a policy of, if it's white, turn it off or switch it so it's come on. That turns on the oxygen for the captain and first officer. That's left off with a very good sealing valve, so that if the plane's left for a few days, it doesn't just trickle out. Now we need to turn on the cockpit voice recorder, and we turn it on and press the test button until it beeps at us. So we actually have power on the aircraft now, so we can arm the emergency exit lighting and the no smoking sign. Nowadays, some aircraft have actually switched over to electronic devices instead of smoking, because obviously smoking hasn't been allowed in aircraft for a very long time. What I want to do now is go to the notepad, and we're going to load in our flight. Flight's already in SimBrief. LJLJ to LIPZ. Oops, I forgot to see how long we've got. Plus 10 minutes. We need to adjust the time a little bit. We're going to make it something like 09:15. Oops, wrong way. So we should have made it 10:45. Got 15 minutes. I'm going to make it a little bit later. I don't really want to get told off for being late. 10:55. So that's the time allowed until I push off stand. We'll get some weather data for our arrival airport, So the METAR here says that the QNH at Venice is 1016. The wind is 100 degrees at 04 knots. And the temperature is 27 degrees. Very nice. I'm going to go to mass and balance. And we can start loading the aircraft. Gives us an option. I don't tend to use real time because I'm usually ready before that. So we'll click fast time rather than instant. Now here it's saying it's planning for 5.6 tons of fuel and we've only got 3 tons. So you can see that's going up. So we're getting fuel added on board, which is good. If we go to the doors, you'll see that we've got doors open, hatches open and so on. But I reckon if we have a look outside, there'll be no way of getting up to the aircraft because it doesn't automatically put the forward stairs on. So if we have a look now, there's our stairs. So in reality, passengers can get on and off the aircraft. I have to give a shout out to a chap who designed and created the livery for my aircraft. This is the Fenix A320, which is one absolutely no doubt the best, in my mind, the best sim on the market. It runs with my Flight Sim 2020, of course. But Saul actually provided all the livery for me, and it just arrived as a zip file, and then it was a new aircraft with my information on it. Very nice. Okay, so we're in the cockpit. We've got our loading as a started up. We want to go now to that was Flight Aware telling me that there's a mayday somewhere. Flight Radar 24. Yeah, just nicely to butt in. Oh, it was only mayday for a short time. Okay, so we got 41 passengers now. There's not much else we need on this part. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to the McDo, as I like to call it. We initialize request an init, which is going to drag the flight plan from the tablet to the this computer. We can put in some information already. Flight number. I happen to know, because I looked before, but oh yeah, wrote it down. The cost index is 18 for this flight. We'll double check that, but I'll put it in for now. And our cruise height is going to be 22,000. We can request the winds at different altitudes. I'm doing a wind request. That gets the wind for all altitudes for different portions of the flight. But for now, we have to wait until loading is completed before we can finish off filling in the data, like, for example, the performance data or the other stuff. It won't take long. In the meantime, we can try and get our flight plan working. Now, we know that Ljubijana is, I worked out before that we're going to be departing on runway 30. And we're going to be using the mod R12 departure route, and I can almost guarantee it's not going to be a mod R1Z. That's it. My writing is awful. So that gives us an exit out of Ljubijana. now we need to find our destination airport. Is usually at the just after the last discontinuity, and we're going to be arriving on ILS 04, and there's XYZ. Don't know why, honestly don't know why, but we'll do it on Y. And the approach we're going to be using is OTG1ZE, or it might be a 2, might be an I. We've got OTG1R. That's the only OTG we have. No, it isn't. Here's the problem I have. I think it's this one here. The maps in SimBrief are out of date unless you buy a subscription to the mapping system, which works out to be about 70 or 80 euros a year or something. There are other mapping systems you can use, but they're not integrated into the flight sim, which is a problem. So sometimes I work out using SimBrief and the maps in Microsoft Flight Simulator what the routing is going to be, but then I find out, because my maps are out of date, that when I go to enter them into the McDo, they don't really exist. So I have to then faff around trying to find another way. We're going to put this switch to plan, and that's going to show us the flight plan that we've just entered in a way that we can see it quite well. What we've got to do is, whoop, wrong way, always do that. Sorry if I upset you then. I'm going to try and get them both on screen at the same time. So we want the McDo. Why does this keep snapping back? I don't know. The McDo and the screen, so we can scroll through our flight plan and you'll see the flight plan moving along. And it gets a bit wiggly when we get around Venice. That was deliberate, just to... That's very wiggly, something went awry there, don't know what. It'll all sort itself out. It might be the escape route. So we've got a nice long approach into Venice with some beautiful views. That's why I chose this route. So okay, the flight plan is in-ish. Only in-ish. Let's have a quick look at how we're doing with the loading. We've got 151 out of 162, so that's nearly there. The information we're going to need is this number here, which is the zero fuel weight of the aircraft. So that's the weight of the aircraft with passengers, luggage and cargo, but no fuel. So we can't really do anything with that until all the cargo and stuff is loaded. But we do know now that we have 5.6 tons of fuel in the tanks. That's not going to change now. So what we can say is our fuel is 5.6. We don't do any rounding. I don't do any rounding up or down. So now we've finished loading. I'm going to go to the zero fuel weight is 60.5, and the CG, this is an important number. This is what we use to set the trim of the plane before we take off. That's 31.2. That's all the information we can get off this screen. But if we go to the next app on the tablet, this is the takeoff performance app. So we know we're going from that airport. We know we're going to take runway 30. We're assuming it's dry. Looked outside already, it's sunny. flap configuration is going to be flaps 1. Now I always leave the packs on. Doesn't make a lot of difference, but to get the best economy, some airlines require the packs, which is the air conditioning, to be switched off for takeoff. There's our takeoff weight and our CG. Now this is a different CG that they use in this one, but don't worry about that. This is going to put the weather data in, and then we click on calculate, and we get V1, VR, V2. V1 is the fastest you can go along the runway before it's too late to try and stop. In other words, if you're thundering down the runway and suddenly a tyre blows or an engine blows up or something like that, and you're over the V1 speed, you have to try and take off. You can't brake. There's not enough braking to actually allow you to stop in time before the end of the runway. I'm writing down the numbers here. I'm writing these numbers: V1, VR, V2. VR is the rotation speed. It's the speed you get to when you want to actually start pulling up to actually get off the ground. V2 is the speed that you'd require to make a safe takeoff with one engine. The other things I need to know is what the flaps and the settings are. So this is flaps 1 and it's set to down 0.3. Flex is allowed up to a temperature of 66 degrees. That's just like an engine setting, which gives you best power economy ratio. But if you go over the temperature, it becomes too hot and not economical anymore. Here we have the maximum acceleration that we could expect, and it's saying it's 2200, and it's going to be, that's engine 1, engine 2, and that's if we've only got one engine. That's all we need to see on here, so we can go back to our McDo, and now we've got a lot of information we can put in. If we go back to the init page and go to page 2 of that, here we see the zero fuel weight, and so we're going to be putting in 60.5, which was the fuel, the weight of the aircraft with passengers, luggage, cargo, etc. And we've got a 31.2 CG. Good. The block is actually the fuel. I don't know why they call it the block. I'm sure there's some reason. And that was 5.6. Now what will happen now is this will go off and calculate all the trip times and reserve fuels and things like that. Now we can go to the performance page and we can enter the V1, VR, V2s. So we've got 147, and VR is the same, 147, and V2 is only slightly higher, 149. We also have the flaps. Oops, I missed out. There we go, and the flex to temperature is 66. Now the accelerations, this is what it's guessing. The other calculation said it's 2200. So I just changed that. I was on a session in a flight simulator locally, and the instructor / pilot didn't know why I did that setting. I just said, I've no idea either. It's there. That's all I need to know. So now we got some information from the destination airport. We knew that the found that the QNH was 1016. We'll pop that in there. The temperature in Venice was 27. And the wind was 100 degrees and 4 knots. And we can pop that in there. Always put this decision height 200. I cheat there, that should be higher.
Minimum.
So we've basically set up the computer. We've set up both screens of the init page. Now notice that takeoff weight is 65.9, landing weight is 64.1, which means we've got 1.8 tons of fuel that we've used for this journey, and somewhere that'll be reflected in probably in the anyway, doesn't matter. That's what it is. So we can pop the flight plan back on. Whenever you click flight plan, it goes back to the start. So if you're rummaging down in the flight plan and you want to go back to the start again, you just click flight plan, and there you go. Here's our fuel prediction. Let's see if we can work it out. It's given us extra time. What happens, there's always a reserve airport, and if you can't land at your initial destination, SimBrief calculates a reserve that might be close to you, and you have to have enough fuel to get to the reserve airport. But most importantly, you have to have enough fuel to fly around for a little bit once you get there, in case, for example, it's fogged in. Right, we have all our fuel loaded, so we can turn the seatbelt sign on now. And now we're going to start the auxiliary power unit. This is a small jet engine at the back of the airplane. I'll show you just now before I start it for noise reasons. That's the exhaust vent for it, and there's an air inlet vent there. Now that provides hydraulic and electrical power. It's not a very big engine, but it's big enough to power the aircraft, because our ultimate goal right now is to disconnect from the ground. We don't want the ground to be stopping us moving by having something connected. I've just turned on all the fuel pumps. We can now start the APU. Normally you press the master switch and then you wait about 3 to 5 seconds or so, and that gives time for flaps to open and airways to be made and things like that. What we can do now is check the progress of the APU, and you'll see the flap is open. N is percentage, is the actual rotational speed of the turbine inside the internal turbine, and now it's become available. So it's generating our 115 volts, and most aviation systems, all aviation systems, use 400 hertz. So we're fine. The APU is running. If we go back to the overhead panel, we can turn on the APU bleed. That forces air from the APU into the air conditioning system. And the reason I'm doing that is because I suspect it's going to be quite warm it's 34 degrees at the back of the airplane. No one wants to be in 34 degrees. So I'm going to turn the air conditioning, whoops, wrong way, to get that down to a reasonable level. You can just hear the sound of the wind rushing. You know, when you sat on an airplane and then all of a sudden you hear the whoosh of air coming out of the vents over your head. Well, that's usually the APU that's doing that. So we've got the APU running, so we're generating power and hydraulics. We're also pushing air through the air conditioning system. We don't need the external power anymore, so we can disconnect that. And just to be very clear, if we go back to our ground services settings, you'll see that we've only got two things connected. We've got the GPU, the ground power unit, we can take that away, and the chocks and cones. Now, this has caught me out a few times. If you don't take the chocks and cones away, you can put the engine up to full power and your plane won't budge because it's being stopped by those. Back up there, go back to check the engine, check the APU's running fine. Now we need to set up our comms and safety systems and so on. We'll set the Squawk 0772. Oddly, the sun's in my face in this. I remember where to put these switches, I think. Hopefully that'll be okay. We can also engage the radar system. This is in the nose cone of the aircraft. I usually set it to WX plus T plus HZD, which is weather, traffic and hazard. Now we're going to get an engine running, so just double check overhead. We're on all the right power, everything's set up okay. Quick scan down this. Oh, I know, quick scan up here. We do the fire alarm tests. So that's the noise you get if you have a fire alarm. I'm going to zip down here. This is a cargo area smoke alarm test button. There we go. Okay, so back to the pedestal. We can go to switch on engine 1. We have to put this switch into the ignition position and start engine 1. If we have a look on here, here's the engines. You can see that there's oil's fine. This is the pressure. Here's the N1 and N2 speed. So the N1 is the internal turbine, not the great big fan at the front. And as that speeds up, the engine starts producing power. Secretly in the background, I didn't hear the voice, but it should have been there. We've told ground that we're ready to taxi, and ground has given us a taxi route and told us to hold short of runway 30 and using taxiway A. I don't know why I didn't hear that. There's probably a setting for that I've forgotten to change. So number 1 engine has now become available. That means we can actually set number 2 engine. Number 2 engine will use air from both the APU and the engine 1. Have a quick look on this. The first officer's McDo. No, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. Received messages. So we should have a number of load sheets. I don't know why there are so many, but you have to accept them. Probably last minute passengers or something like that. To be fair, I've got all the data another way, so the only legal obligation is for me to accept this, except for the one at the very top, because we want to be 100% sure. And like most things, this is in sections. Fueling tanks 5.6, which is exactly right. Happy with that. We'll accept that one. Now it'll show that we've viewed all the messages. Now, the center of gravity we were talking about, what we need to do is set that by using this wheel. And the center of gravity was actually 31.2. Now you can see numbers just here and an arrow. What we want to do is use that and align it roughly where we think 31.2 would be. Given that that goes 30 to 35, I think we're roughly in the right area. Some people say as long as it's anywhere in the green section it doesn't matter, but if it's there to set, I'll set it. So let's go back to the overhead panel. We've got 2 running engines. We've got no failures or faults showing. We don't need the APU anymore, so I'm going to turn it off now, because the engines are actually providing us all the power that we need. So I'm going to switch on my lights, the ones I need. These are harder to do than they should be. Strobe I'll put to auto. I'll switch it on as soon as we get off the ground. We're going to be taxiing. I think it's a good idea to put the lights on anyway. Now if we have a little look outside, and I warn you it's going to get noisy now because we can hear the engines from outside. We can see the only cheat I use, which is the blue taxiway markings. So if we want to catch up with this, we really need just to reverse about 3 plane lengths, and then we'll be able to see the markings out of the front. In fact, we can do the reverse with the camera here. What I'm going to do is go to full reverse power and turn off the parking brake. Now the A320 rolls very easily. Doesn't need a great deal of power for taxiing purposes. So now I'm going to taxi forward. I've got a nose wheel steering tiller. I'll go back to the cockpit because of the noise. That's better. All my control systems are homemade, apart from a joystick that I picked up at a charity shop for £4, I believe. I've got homemade throttles, throttle quadrant, which don't look realistic, but they look okay. I've got rotary switches to enable things to be adjusted, but unfortunately it works with all the other planes except for this one, and quite rightly Fenix believe that's proprietary information. If anybody has done this and set it up like that, maybe they'd let me know. So I've never flown out of this airport before, but my plan is to go directly to the end of the taxiway, hop on the runway, and get moving. I'll try and keep these menus out of the way as much as I can. Nearly always, air traffic control will give me a message to hold position for other traffic, and if you look on the external view, there's no other traffic. It's just a little thing that they've popped in to remind you that they're there, I think. This is obviously
traffic.
Yeah, right. This is obviously an entrance or an exit to the runway. We're not taking that one. We'll use the full length of the runway, I think, as we should do. The Gulf line occasionally is because I've taken a swig of tea and let go of my steering tiller. Perhaps it needs a little bit of softening out, but I can control the airplane really well with it. To hook up all the controls I've made into the aircraft, I've used a dedicated USB chip. It takes something like 6 analog inputs, and I think it can be up to 200 odd digital inputs, which are like switches or whatever. And then it presents itself as a USB device in the control system, in the control section of the setup, and it works really well. I've not had a moment's problem with it. I had one piece of self-induced trouble when I'd added a new linear potentiometer to act as a gentle braking system, and it didn't work, and eventually I worked out that you have to reset the device after you've added something new, and that's a simple power on and power off. So I'll show you. This is gentle braking. Normally the braking is slammed to a stop, so that's gentle braking, which works very well. On the normal braking, the trigger on the joystick just hits the brakes on or off, and that can be probably, if one of the passengers had their head against the window, they might bump it. Look, that's the normal braking. Bang, stop. So we're just coming round the corner now to the hold point for the runway. And before we go any further than this, I've got a couple of other things to set. So we won't ask for... I've been given permission to take off. So what we need to do is set these barometers to the right level, 3003. I don't know why, but it depends where you're flying from, what version of the barometer reading. Some of them will give it you in metric, like 1012. Some of them will give you in inches, like this, 3003. Mustn't forget the standby barometer, because if our main barometers die, we need to have something that we can rely on. So this has also got to be set. .3003. And we were told originally to go up to 8,000 feet. There's something easy to forget setting this. If you do forget to set it, the plane does some really weird things. Now, to configure for takeoff, we want our auto brake set to maximum, which I've done. we want to arm the spoilers, which is this thing here. Just pull it up and that little grey collar shows it's armed. We need flap set to take off, which is one set of flaps. I'll just give the takeoff config test button a bump, and it gave us a warning there. What did it warn us? No, it was okay. It's because the flaps hadn't finished moving. So we're ready to go. We've got clearance, so we don't need to wait. I have to tell you, it's a very... I have to be like an octopus when I'm flying this, because the microphone is right in front of me. That's blocking my vision of the joystick, and to get to the joystick I have to reach around the microphone, and then I've got my right hand, which is available for the keyboard, which is a little awkward as I'm more comfortable using my left hand for that. So there we go, runway 30, that's 30 printed on the runway. Let's get lined up before we roll off. So we're ready to go. All brakes are off. I'm holding the plane with the foot brake, so we're going to go up to climb mode. Let the engine spool up, then up to flex, and off we go. I'm putting slight down pressure on the joystick. That's to make sure that the nose wheel has positive contact with the ground, because we're using that to keep us level on the runway, or in line on the runway. I forgot to do something. I've got to move that so I can actually see the speeds. 120. And 145 was our V1 and rotation speed. So we're okay to rotate now. Get up in the air. Get our gear up. Make sure it's up. We can get rid of our flaps, and we need to set the throttles to climb mode. Now the A320 goes into autopilot really easily, but you have to keep your eye on it, because just like that it goes off of autopilot again. So we need to be going round left, we need to be climbing. We have got mountains around us, so we don't want to be climbing too high because we'll be losing vertical speed. But we'll be losing height, I should say. So let's get back online with the track. I'm flying manually just now. My flight director is telling me I need to go a bit left. It's nicely lined up. At some point ATC will allow me to kick in. I don't know what's stopping it right now. Flight director is nearly perfect. Frankly, I'm not sure why autopilot won't kick in, but it can be touchy. So, we can get the hairs directly in the box, then we'll be flying in the right position. Right, we have an autopilot that's activated. Right, what I'm going to do now is turn down the external sound, because it really is loud. They've lost the sound altogether. What is the sound gone? Never mind. No sound. Who cares? Let's go. Yeah, there it is. Oh, I know why. When you go to a different app, it mutes the sound. So we'll go to external. And we'll have a look at the views around us. So if you have a look outside.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking.
Shush. We're having a nice fly over the mountains.
Yeah. Why am I looking outside?
I'm talking to my viewers. Right, we've got a request to climb up to flight level 180, which we shall do now. Notice how different the sound is in when you're inside the cockpit as opposed to outside. So let's go to FCU, and we need to go up to 18,000. And they want us to get there fairly quickly. We can control how fast or how quickly we go up and down by this control here. It just reminds me of something. Put our strobe light on. We don't need that one, and we don't need that one. So, as I say, we can control the vertical climb rate or descent rate with using this, but the computer does a reasonably good job of doing it itself. We're now up to 10,000 feet. Now, this is a bit strange, and I'll see if I can show you what's happening. It could be that it's sensing changes in air pressure outside or something like that. Or there might be an actual constraint on our flight plan which says you can't go any higher than this or any faster than this. So we're here right now, and the limit for our height at this particular waypoint is 10,000 feet. Which is why the aircraft has decided that that's where it's going to stop climbing. Now we're past that, and we're going to carry on up to our assigned altitude. When you get above a certain height, different depending where you are, you need to set these barometers to standard. Standard for inches is 2092, I think it is. That means that any instructions that flight air traffic control give you is relative to a theoretical sea level ground. I'm just going to turn off the passenger seatbelt sign. We're doing quite nicely. Once again, the views outside are amazing. I'll talk about the setup I have. I've recently upgraded my computer using basically all my spare cash. I used the same processor I used to have, which was a Ryzen 7 2400 or something like that. I can't remember. I bought a new graphics card, or a new old graphics card, or a second-hand one, which is a GeForce GTX 1070. GTX 1070. Upgraded my memory and a new motherboard, and that made a fantastic difference. On the earlier machine, with the settings as high as they are now, I was getting about 10 frames a second, and this is pretty quick now. It's roughly about 20, 25, but I've got everything turned up, really turned up to the max. Now this is the top of the flight. We'll be coming up to cruise height soon. There we go. Climb up to 240. That's probably going to be the maximum height for the trip. We're coming over some water now. If I have a quick look on the map, which you don't trust with this plane particularly, but it will give us an idea where we are. I think that's the route we're on. That's a guess. And so we're coming out into I don't know what sea that is actually. Is it part of the Mediterranean still? Yeah, there's the big boot of Italy. I always remember that from school in geography. The big boot of Italy kicked little Sicily right in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. So yeah, there's Sicily, Italy. So we're about to go over water, as you can see there. And we're probably about halfway along. Third of the way along, rather. When we get down to about here, it's going to start becoming a little busy, because we've got to go through lots of waypoints to get this bend achieved. I may kick some of these waypoints out to make it more simple, but we'll see how it goes. So we've now been handed off to Zagreb Center, and Zagreb is telling us to continue to Daxnu as planned. Daxnu will be one of these. There it is. That's the waypoint that we're at just now. All we're doing is passing our flight information to them so that they can see us on their radar, because we've got the squawk and they know that we're there. Interestingly, the radar system used by air traffic control isn't a standard radar system. It doesn't just send out a beam of high frequency energy and wait for it to bounce back and work out roughly. Pretty much that's how ground radar works, but for the actual flying up in the air part, they use the transponder and they give you a code, and they send out a signal saying, is there a transponder out there? And the transponders reply with their code name, their code number, and relevant information such as height, speed, direction, and so on. It's not done by the standard bounce a radar signal of something. It's like an ask and request system. So let's have a little look outside. Everybody cover your ears. There's going to be a loud engine noise soon. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Venice is over here somewhere. All this stuff here is roughly where Venice is, I think. But to get there, somewhere over there anyway, we're going to do a loop and then come back again. Oh, they're asking us to hurry up the climb. Let's see where we're at. We're at 270. We're not getting any higher. So what we need to do is add a bit of... Come on, get yourself moving. Let's say we set that to 1500 feet per minute. Switch it on, and then we'll start climbing at that rate until we reach our assigned altitude. You need to be a bit careful with that because it will overtake the pitch control if you're not paying attention. So you could end up going into a stall. So let's have a look on the screen, because remember there was all that weird stuff going on. Let's see if there's any of that as we come into Venice. Yes, there's loads of it, look. So it looks like I might be getting rid of some waypoints here. So there's speed and height restrictions all around the place. No, we need to zoom in, but if I zoom in we can't see them yet. When we get a little bit further on, we'll be able to see them. We're now approaching our assigned height. Now it's asking us to climb up to 340. 340. Now that is much unexpected. I thought our cruise altitude was going to be 250 or something. So we're going to need to get a wiggle on to get up there. So we'll set this up to like 2,000 feet per minute.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
That wasn't the aircraft shouting mayday. It was flight radar 24 again. Now, with these buttons, when you click and the arrow's pointing down, it pulls the button out. And you can actually see that happen. If you click when the arrow's pointing up, it pushes the button in. Like that. Normally pushing a button upwards, like this one, these two, will assign control to the flight's computer, and that's what that blob means there. With no blob, it's telling us that we are controlling the height. We're telling the height what we want. It's not computer controlled. So we can see our really complicated wiggly entry in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete a waypoint. This one looks like DTGIG. Let's have a look down here. There, OTGIG. So I think we should clear that. To clear it, we need to get rid of any messages until we get a clear there. So if we clear OTGIG, it'll tell us there's a flight plan discontinuity. I think we can clear that also. Right, let's have a look at what it looks like now. That's straightened it up a bit. I haven't got that huge wobble. But we could get rid of, sorry to mess around with angles like this. We could get rid of PZ something something something. There's a, let's see what we've got on the McDo. PZ655. So let's get rid of PZ655 as well. And we should be able to just clear this flight plan discontinuity. There we go. Now let's have a look at the screen again. That's us at height. Yeah, that's better. In fact, we could set it up so instead of doing this wiggle, we go straight to PZ2850. So that would be a direct PZ2050. No. That's 850. Is it PZ 704? That's the one we want to get rid. No, we want to go to. Sorry. We want to go to PZ 850. So if we click on that and go direct, we'll see we've got rid of all those stupid squiggles, and we're now ready to come in to start our approach. Hang on. Right, I had to take a little break for a second. So, yeah, you can see now that we've got a much straighter route in. But you can also see that all the constraints. So what it's saying is for the first one, let's get that out of the way. Our flight level should be 090, so 9,000 feet. And we mustn't be doing any more than 230 knots. Now remember, we were told to climb to 34,000 feet, and we haven't received an instruction to go down yet. Just scrolling through in case we missed it. Nope. So I'm going to take the decision myself. We're actually going to drop dramatically now to 15,000. Look, now he's telling me that to go to 22. He didn't tell me that before. I've looked in the logs. I've noticed that sometimes these things get missed. Now we've got our speed restriction in. So we want to make sure our speed is not above 230, so we'll just set it to 225. And by pulling it out, it means that we've taken that control. Interestingly, the throttles are idle. That means that we're literally just gliding. I'm going to set this higher. So we're going to be going down as quickly as we can. So we're plummeting down, really, but the speed is still going up. So what I want to do is use the I want to use the air brake. Set it to full. We don't normally leave it set to full for very long, but what it might do is reduce our speed a little. We're in the system now where we really need to be lower, much lower than we are. So I'm actually going to take us down to like 8,000 feet, otherwise we're going to be overshooting the airport completely. 6,000. I feel under these circumstances that we're too high. So what we could do to lose a bit of speed and gain a bit of time is then put a hold in PZ 2739, PZ 2730, I think that's it, and we'll put a hold. Let it compute the hold and insert it. Now if we look on our screen, we'll see that we've got a hold point here, so we're just going to go around in circles until we've lost enough height. We're below 240 knots, so I could actually extend the landing gear, which would give us some good resistance. We're looking for our 3 greens. Three greens. We need to bring the air brake in. You can't leave it out too long. We're still at 25,000 feet. I don't know why air traffic control didn't take us down before that, but never mind. So we're going to be flying this loop until we get down to a decent speed. Now we've got control of the speed here, so I'm going to take that down to 220. And because we're going a bit slower, I'm going to put some flaps on. Flap lever not 0. Don't get that one. Flap a lever not 0. No. We've got flaps 1 set now, and you'll notice these red bars. These are the maximum, starts off at the maximum speed you can go. So we've got to set that holding speed. Maybe we do that in the McDo, can't remember. Minute. Right now I'm going to have to pause the flight. I apologize to everybody. An issue has arisen that requires my attention immediately. Flight freeze. So that should freeze our flight where we are, and I'm gonna stop the live feed probably for about 20 minutes, and then I'll start it up again for the landing. Apologies if you've been watching all the way through, but something has cropped up that needs my attention. But thanks if you've been watching most of the way.